overall city numbers.
So they're trying to improve those numbers. Let's talk about the panoply of political news that happened this week, starting with Governor Pritzker. Will he or won't he run again? He says he's weighing whether it's worth it after his daughter was targeted by political foes. Take a look.
I have two teenage kids, and spending time with them is extraordinarily important to me. And of course, my wife, the impact of being governor on them weighs on me. There have been a lot of unfair, accusations against my daughter. Those are all things that we weigh in the process of making a decision.
Mike Flannery, the governor, put $35 million in his reelection campaign. Do you buy any of this hemming and hawing about running again, or is he running again?
He's running again.
All right, do you care to expand on that?
He's, that money is just the beginning of it. After several stories suggested, whoa, he may not go. There was pushback from within the administration, people saying, hey, the First Lady, MK Pritzker, loves the job, loves working with the state. And when I went over to the Thompson Center to do my interview that in the string of them the governor did yesterday, I went right by MK's office there. Look, yes, he has been the target of unfair hits on the family. There's been some ugly tinges and suggestions of anti-Semitism in some of this anti-COVID excessive, zealous attacks on him. So that's frightening and concerning, but he's running again.
And one of those folks that had attacked at least the shutdown rules was a guy that is running in the Republican primary, Darren Bailey from downstate Xenia. And there's also Gary Rabin. Rachel Hinton, are there any other potential GOP competitors that have stepped up at this point?
I mean, there have been murmurs of Representative Rodney Davis potentially jumping in, but for right now, I think many people are trying to get their wits about them, trying to figure out where the money would come from, especially on the GOP side of things. And now with the primary delayed a little bit, they have time. They have time to weigh things out. They have time to try to get donors on their side, to try to make their case to the pool of donors who typically fund Republican campaigns. I think right now, the real get would be trying to get like a Ken Griffin, someone with pretty deep pockets on your side to go against Governor Pritzker, who himself is a billionaire. Who can do that? Where that will come from, I'm not sure that we know yet.
Yeah, that $35 million is a scary number, but if it's Ken Griffin again going up against him, it'll be a replay of that graduated income tax fight. Rachel, also today you saw that the governor signed the new legislative districts for the state House and Senate, even though he had campaigned on an independent commission drawing it. Did he go back on his campaign promise?
We in the media say yes. I mean, he says no. He says, that was dependent on a constitutional amendment being drawn to make it so that there was an independent map commission. Without that constitutional amendment, then he's following through on his word, since he's not a legislator who can put something like that through. Republicans say that is a flip-flop. They are upset with him for signing these maps, which they say are dramatically unfair. They push them into districts together. They push them into districts with Democrats. And I think we'll see many primaries that are really them fighting against each other. Whether or not that's fair, whether or not he follows through on his campaign promise, I'm sure Republicans will continue to use that message to say, no, he didn't, and your word is your bond, and you did not keep your word.
Certainly, they'll amp up the rhetoric on that, but Steve Daniels, does the governor pay any kind of political price for going back on this, or is this just too weedy of an issue?
Yeah, I don't really think so. I do think that Republicans are seeking to make it into a broader narrative of can you trust him? Is he good to his word? And will be part of a number of examples, I think, that they'll lay out to make that case. But no, voters. We're talking about an election that's taking place sometime from now. If Republicans are going to run commercials saying he signed a partisan map after saying that he was going to do something that was more bipartisan, I don't see that being a real good investment, put it that way. So, look, around the country, those states in which parties control both the governor's mansion and the legislature run out partisan maps. And the United States Supreme Court has said that's fine. The courts don't really have any say over that anymore. So, put it this way: if you're an Illinois Democrat, why are you going to take a different stance from a Republican in Texas?
A state like North Carolina or Wisconsin, where they openly talk about partisan map drawing on the other side. Mike Flannery, this week we saw once again a budget come down literally at the 11th hour, 9,000 pages that hardly anybody read. You saw that partisan remap. You've got the new Speaker of the House here, Chris Welch. Is it, as the Who said, meet the new boss, same as the old boss?
Well, it depends on how much space, I guess, how big your type was. I've seen 3,000 pages as one estimate.
Maybe
I think
24 font Arial or something like that would be 9,000 pages.
So, my sense is that this is not, this kind of process and procedural thing is not something that resonates with voters, but there was not a lot of transparency. There were, this was something that, I remember back pre-COVID when I would be down in Springfield for those votes. I remember going round and round the mulberry bush with Mike Madigan, who would dump a monstrous budget on the desks.
That's a fun image.
Just a few minutes to go.
The two of you running round and round the mulberry bush.
Yeah. And, he loved that kind of sparring. And, and Welch says much like what Madigan would say, which is that this budget didn't spring full blown from the brow of Zeus a half hour before the vote. It was, we've been considering it for months. The general outlines were clear to members. On the other hand, there was a lot of the fine print in there that even the Democratic sponsors of key pieces of legislation didn't know what changes were made at the 11th hour, and we may still be discovering some surprises down the road.
And there's still some things to be ironed out. Mariah Woelfel, elected school board that would have 21 CPS school board members elected eventually by the year 2027, I think. Speaker Welch has indicated it's likely to pass in the House. Mayor Lightfoot is against it, but at this point, does she have any juice down there to stop it?
Well, I think that she tried her darndest to change some of the things in the elected school board. There were some compromises made in light of her criticism, including, delaying the fully elected school board until 2027, which is a huge disappointment to proponents who've been fighting for an elected school board in Chicago for years. She vows to continue to try to make some changes before it passes the House. I'd imagine she's going to try to push back on a moratorium on school closings until 2025, and some other criticisms that she has of the bill, but it remains to be seen.
And is there anything here, Mariah, that would prevent a cash-a-palooza in some of these elections? As we've seen in places like Los Angeles, where upwards of $1 million is spent on these races, and it really comes down to the teachers union backing a candidate versus charter school interest backing a candidate. Is there anything to prevent that?
Well, that's Mayor Lightfoot's main criticism, is that there's no cap on spending in these school board races. And so one concern would be that a lot of the races would go to the Chicago Teachers Union, which is well positioned to run for these seats, or some of the other interests that you mentioned. And
when she says this week that what happened on this bill had nothing to do with democracy, Mariah, what does she mean?
I think she's speaking about the idea that actual local parents and school advocates would have very little say on the school board because of the lack of cap on campaign spending.
Rachel Hinton, a fait accompli now that Speaker Welch, and it did pass the Senate, but now that Speaker Welch in the House has said he likes the bill and it's probably going to pass.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I believe many of the Chicago representatives have supported it, same with the senators who are based in Chicago. I know that Representative Delia Ramirez, or rather when the bill was in the House before this amendment that allowed it to pass the Senate, before that came up, Delia Ramirez really whipped the votes, gave an impassioned speech on the House floor. I believe that it passed the House at that point in time. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't later on this month.
All right, also unresolved down there, this massive energy bill that would give, yet again, subsidies to 3 Exelon nuclear plants that are losing money, and they would propose carbon-free energy in Illinois by 2050. It's stalled, but Steve Daniels, since you're the master of all things energy here, before we get to why it's stalled, can you just explain to me again why it's in the interest of taxpayers to bail out 3 more nuclear plants 4 years after they bailed out 2 other nuclear plants, all of which can't make money on their own?
Well, it depends who you're listening to. If your goal is a carbon-free power generation industry in Illinois within some reasonable time frame, Exelon's trump card in this debate was you're not going to get there if we're closing multiple nuclear plants. They don't emit carbon, and when we close them, that gap, that need will be filled by fossil fuel plants, natural gas, almost certainly, because gas is so cheap. That was the ultimate trump card argument here. Then it came down to, okay, well, are your plants really unprofitable? And the governor ordered up an independent audit. That audit found that yes, 2 of them were or would be and needed to be propped up. Then there ensued a big fight over how much money the bailout would be. The governor made it clear that there was going to be a bailout months ago when he said, I don't want nuclear plants to close. Once that happened, it was only a matter of how much money was going to be.
So explain why it's stalled right now.
It's stalled right now because there's a disagreement over a coal-fired power plant in way southern Illinois that was built only 12 years ago, and was designed at the time, and still does, to burn Illinois coal, which is high sulfur. Almost all the coal-fired power plants in the state burn coal from Wyoming, which is lower sulfur. And the coal industry downstate has been running on fumes for a long time. So that was the idea at the time. And financing that plant were all of these municipal utilities, one of them in the state's capital, Springfield, others of them in the western suburbs. Naperville has its own utility. And those suburbs or those municipalities signed contracts that went on for decades. They're on the hook to pay for that. So the dispute is over. If you're going to close all coal plants in 2035, you got a number of municipalities that are on the hook to pay for it until nearly 2050, and that's what's holding it up. There are still discussions about the compromise. The governor has said no, 2035 is it for coal plants.
So they want to.
I think we'll see something.
They want to carve out for that. We'll see what happens there. Also, Mike Flannery, ethics, kind of a puny ethics bill, in spite of the massive federal investigation and indictments into Madigan-connected lobbyists and ComEd officials. Fair to say that lawmakers came up short with ethics reform.
Oh my God, it's a huge disappointment, Paris. We did get some stricter requirements for financial disclosure involving potential conflicts of interest, and that's not trivial, but we still have this bizarre job that exists almost nowhere else but Illinois, of being where you can be a lawmaker and a lobbyist. You can't lobby your fellow lawmakers for pay, but you can get hired by ComEd Exelon to go up and lobby the Chicago City Council or the Naperville Council. There was an effort made to put a few restrictions on that, but it's almost meaningless. Yeah, big disappointment.
Yeah, the revolving door of lobbyists, and Luis Arroyo comes to mind as a lawmaker that got in trouble for lobbying. Mariah Woelfel, let's go back to the city with Mayor Lightfoot. There was a new WGN poll out this week that found her approval rating at 48%. It's nothing to crow about, but certainly not a guarantee that she couldn't win re-election again. What do you make of that rating?
Well, I think that there are a lot of ardent Lightfoot haters on Twitter, but I think that this poll showed that not the majority, but a wide swath of Chicagoans are happy with her overall job performance. I think it was, around 39-40% who disapproved, and then, another chunk of a chunk change of that said that they were unsure about her performance. It's lower than other Illinois officials. I think Pritzker's approval rating in the poll was around 60%. And so I think that maybe it's nothing to write home about, but better than expected potentially.
And maybe another sign that Twitter isn't always real life. And also in that poll,
could I just chime in with one key point there, Paris? I think 61% of voters give the mayor credit for being mostly honest or very honest. That's a pretty good number for a politician, but it links back to issues, I think, that we've been discussing. Why doesn't she have any juice, as you put it, down in Springfield? Why doesn't she have the clout that a Richie Daley or a Mayor Emanuel had? She's not playing nearly as vigorous a patronage game and backdoor favors as those mayors did. And the flip side is that when she needs votes and when she can't count on the Chicago delegation in either the House or the Senate.
It seems like the Chicago Teachers Union, especially on the school board bill, has a lot more sway down there than she does.
They play that game much better than she does.
Yeah,
she's not playing it at all.
And another part of that poll, Steve Daniels, the Chicago Police Department, has a 60% approval rating. I mean, they're plus 30 there. Is that a surprise to you, given the rhetoric over the last year on defunding police and police reform?
No, not really. I think that, especially I think there are more concerns about crime. That's been sort of as we've gone through COVID, that's been the sneaky big issue that I think may be the big one in the upcoming mayoral election when it occurs. What's happening with crime? So when people are afraid and people are worried about their own safety and the like, who can they turn to? I'm using the term people loosely, but it's police, and so I'm not really all that surprised.
Yeah, and let's dovetail on that to talk about some of the shooting numbers this year. Despite shootings increasing, Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown put a positive spin on the work that his offices are doing. Take a look.
One violent crime is one too many, because there's a victim behind every statistic. There's a family that's grieving behind every person who is the victim of violent crime. But we are making progress.
And certainly there were numbers over Memorial Day, 3 reported homicides, at least by the police department, which was the lowest in 10 years, despite an overall rise in violent crime to this point this year. Mariah Wolfel, is there any evidence of a trend that this might not be as bad a summer as it looked like it was going to be? Or is it too early to say that?
Well, I would say that the police department has credited the low crime rate this weekend with relying heavily on partnerships between the police and the community violence interrupters that, go out and target high violence blocks in the city and work out, so-called non-aggression agreements between rival gangs when they suspect that a rival shooting is going to take place. And so I think, if that is truly the reason why we saw such a low violence rate over Memorial Day weekend, which historically is one of the most violent weekends in Chicago, and each year, you'd have to ask if those same amount of resources are going to be applied, for future weekends throughout the city. Or
at the same time, there's just a lot of nervousness over where some shootings are happening. On Lakeshore Drive, repeatedly. Rachel Hinton, there was some action on gun legislation in Springfield. Can you get us up to speed on where some of that stands?
Very little action. Nothing is sent to the governor currently. A House bill that would mandate fingerprints for to be able to get a firearm owner identification card That was a sticking point for many Republicans as well as some Democrats. That bill passed, I think, narrowly, meaning that it could go on to the Senate, but a member of the House put a brick on it, meaning that they filed a motion to reconsider. So that bill stays in the House until or unless that person decides to take that motion off of it. The Senate had a different bill. That bill does not mandate fingerprints in order to get that ID card, but session adjourned, the Senate adjourned before that bill could be taken up. So now if and when the legislators decide to come back to Springfield, they'll have to take up that matter.
All right.
And it's not entirely clear what that'll look like yet.
All right, we'll watch that. We only have a few seconds left, so let's end on a fun note. Someone want to tell me something fun they have planned for once the city achieves full reopening next Friday. Mike, you'll probably be out at a Sox game. Mariah,
I'm going to lots of Sox
Flurry.
games.
You'll be at plenty of Sox games. Steve, you'll be at Riot Fest.
I will, but that's not till September. So
okay.
Yeah, let's just but yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to concerts again.
As am I. All right, well, we are out of time, so our thanks to Mariah Woelfel, Mike Flannery, Rachel Hinton, and Steve Daniels. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Weekend Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And join us next week at 7. Illinois officials say one way to control invasive Asian carp, change their name. And from cornrows to three-strand braids, the art of hair braiding and why it's more than just a hairstyle. And now for the Weekend Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law